Corbyn, we thought you were Monsieur Zen, now you're angry. Is this a kind of new fiery rhetoric to try and change the terms of the election?
I want this election to be a choice for the people of this country about the kind of future they want. And what we're doing is setting out our policies which will help to improve the lives of the vast majority, which will reframe our economy into an investment-led economy that will provide good quality jobs for the future. 6 million people earn less than the living wage. 1 million are on 0 hours contracts. It's not right, it's not fair, and above all, it's not necessary.
Many of these problems that you talked about in your speech, I mean, some of them date back to a Labour government, though. Things like the privatisation of the NHS, that's even a few miles away from here, that was down to Labour government and PFIs.
I made it very clear that the privatisation of the NHS has to stop. It's got considerably worse since the Health and Social Care Act was passed after the last general election by the coalition government, and our National Health Service needs investment, needs support, but it also has to be integrated with the social care system because many of the problems of the NHS actually come from the shortage of social care facilities.
What was all this rhetoric about a day of reckoning, about being angry? What is it? It's a sort of Trumpian twinge to what you're saying.
Trumpian twinge? No, not Trumpian. No, it's about fairness in taxation. We're not raising a tax and not proposing to raise tax on anyone below middle income earners. We're not proposing that at all. We're not proposing to raise VAT or national insurance. What we are proposing is that those at the very top and those very big corporations that manage by sleight of hand to place their money into tax havens or evade tax by those kind of accounting procedures, we don't think it's fair, we don't think it's right, and the inequalities in modern Britain are absolutely massive and amongst the greatest in the industrial world and getting worse. We think it's time to change direction.
So clearly you do, but when you look at the performance in polls, when you look at the performance in the local elections, it doesn't seem like your message is getting through, or that people think that you're the agent for this change.
The support we're getting is of people who understand what the policies are about, understand what we're saying on education, what we're saying on housing, what we're saying on health, and what we're saying about the role of government. What I said at the end of my speech was, in life, we don't want to ever pass by on the other side while somebody is suffering. It's a simple human instinct. You support people. What I'm saying is that a policy in government has to be, do we pass by on the other side knowing there are children growing up in poverty, knowing there are children going to school hungry, knowing there are people sleeping rough on our streets, knowing that often families who are relatively middle-income earners can't afford to get anywhere for their children to live, so they're stuck.
But
it's a question of having a government...
Theresa May is doing something about that. She's helping cap their energy prices.
What Theresa May has done is presided over more cuts in the NHS, more cuts in social care, more cuts in mental health facilities, and the indignity of schools being asked to have collections from their parents to help pay for the teachers' salaries. That's what she's done.
Are you going to match her cap in energy prices?
We're going to have a much more radical proposal on energy, which unfortunately you're going to have to wait for a few days.
You're going to nationalise the energy companies?
You'll have to wait and see what we're going to do, but we're going to make sure that we have good quality and secure energy supplies in Britain, and that we have a pricing system that means that people don't pay through the nose as they do at the moment.
Isn't the problem is that Theresa May and you have identified that the people are ready for a slightly bigger hand of government, and that means you have to trust the person who has that hand with their competence, see them outside number 10 exercising that control and power, and at the moment the people of Britain don't see you in that role.
We're a party of very large membership. We're also a party of very competent, very experienced team in our shadow cabinet and in many areas of local government across the country. Leadership is about leading, but it's also about listening. It's also about keeping in touch with the people that put us into office in the first place. And I think there's nothing wrong in saying, actually, I spend a lot of time listening to people, many of whom may not agree with me, but you've got to give them a hearing. That way, that makes you a better leader.
Do you see yourself, do you visualise yourself outside number 10?
I visualise the election of a Labour government on June the 8th, which will do a lot to inspire generations of young people to get something good in our society, but also help frame a society in which we don't have so much isolation amongst the elderly and such massive divisions between the wealthy and the poorest.
So Brexit negotiations will be at the top of the agenda for any incoming Prime Minister. How are you going to handle these negotiations with Jean-Claude Juncker? Theresa May said you'd stand up to him. What are you going to do?
Well, I don't think you start negotiations by threatening the other side. I was in touch yesterday to congratulate President-elect Macron and sent him a letter last night outlining our broad position, which is that we want to maintain a good relationship with Europe in the future. We want tariff-free access to the market in Europe, and we will also guarantee the rights of EU nationals living in Britain. And I invite other countries to do the same for British nationals living in their countries. And we will approach the negotiations on the lines that we've set out, which
Will you be tough, though?
Listen, the job of government is to stand up for the people of this country, and you have to put that case to them. There's a lot of mutual interest going on here as well, because a lot of our manufacturing industry in aircraft, cars, many other industries rely on supply chains on both sides of the channel. If we end up, as Theresa May has threatened, with no agreement with the European Union, then suddenly there's a tariff wall around every product this country produces. That surely is going to concentrate, I hope, the minds of many people who realise it's important to get an agreement. We will work for one. We've already reached out to meet the Commission, to meet members of the European Parliament and governments all across Europe. And indeed, Keir Starmer has been working very hard to build those relationships so that he'll be in a position to strengthen those relationships even further.
Now, you say the Brexit issue is settled. What do you say to your Remain supporters? Two-thirds of the Labour voters voted Remain. Is the issue of the single market membership and the customs union membership also settled in your view?
Well, the single market issue is a question of membership of the European Union, so it's a question of access to that European...
Settled. We can't be members of the EEA, we can't have a normal solution.
Those options are possible, but the issue has to be fundamentally the trade access we have to the European market. That's the principle behind it. And also the rights that we've gained, and I did include in my speech today a reference to human rights that have come from the European Convention, which is partly European Union, partly Council of Europe, but also the question of workers' rights, consumer rights and product safety, which comes from the European Union. All those things will be protected under a Labour government. We're not threatening to set up some kind of low corporate tax haven on the shores of Europe. We want to work with Europe.
So was your pitch today, was it a pitch to that left-behind demographic that voted Brexit? Are you going for those UKIP supporters that the polls show 50%, two-thirds, are going straight to the Conservatives?
We're going for the election for the whole country. There are parts of Britain that have seen precious little or almost no investment of any sort since the end of the coal industry in the 1980s. There are communities where people who once had good, secure jobs in heavy industry in Britain, in steel and coal, no longer have that security, and they have insecure jobs. So what we're doing is saying, actually, we think it's time for a national initiative that does ensure we have a national investment bank regionally based to deal with the regional imbalances in Britain. Because there's a lot of anger out there, and rightly so, because they see investment going in the wrong place, they see their communities being diminished, and they see greater levels of poverty. Nobody can be happy with the level of inequality and poverty we have in some parts of Britain.
So there's the appeal perhaps to those UKIP swing voters. I just wondered, some parties that did oppose the Labour Party have now backed voting for Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party, the Communist Party, for example. Are you happy with their endorsement of your party?
I am putting forward a case for the Labour Party, for our massive membership of the Labour Party, more than 500,000, of the policies we're putting forward. And I think what's better is if we look at the reality of what we're offering to the people of this country, and I think it's a good offer.
But you've criticised this sort of UKIPification of the Conservative Party, and UKIP supporters going to the Conservatives. I just wonder, some hard left parties now back the Labour Party. Do you welcome that, or do you sort of say, you want to keep them at a distance?
I welcome anyone who supports the Labour Party on the policies we are putting forward, which are about democracy, about human rights, about social justice, about an economy and a society that works for all. And I think we've won a lot of people to that position. And I'm enjoying this election campaign, and we've got 4 weeks to get our message across. and we're going to relentlessly pursue policies in that.
And you're going to win. You're going to win in 4 weeks' time.
4 weeks to get a Labour government.
Just one last point. Do you feel that your slogan there, for the many and not the few, how do you turn that into votes? How do you turn that into many votes and not few votes, which is where the polls show you are?
Well, you turn it into many votes by making sure people fully understand that the security the National Health Service gives them is under threat from underfunding, cuts and privatisation. We instead will invest in it. That the security of an expanding manufacturing base in Britain is best achieved if you have public participation in it. Look at the parallel of European economies where governments have not been afraid to be involved in an industrial strategy, such as the Scandinavian countries, such as Germany, then they do rather better than we do. I think there's a lot we can learn from others.